John, one of our most frequent, maybe our most frequent guest is back with us this week, and it's hard to do much better than Ron Darling.
Absolutely most frequent and one of our most favorite for certain. One of the smartest guys in baseball, had a great pitching career, a pitching expert, certainly a Mets expert. And we'll ask him whether he's part of the best booth in baseball. I know a lot of people think that, but not everybody. But we will ask him about that and all about pitching and the Mets.
Yeah, a lot to cover there. And you and I are going to talk about the Mets as the trade deadline approaches. We're going to talk about the Yankees as the trade deadline approaches. We hope you listen to it all and stick with us on the show with Joel Sherman and Jon Heyman. John, we're very, very close to the trade deadline. Both New York teams are certainly in the race. Yankees continue to struggle as the second half begins, and so do the Mets, who lost two of the first three to the Marlins, as the Yankees did with the Rays while we're doing this. And I just have this overall thought about the Yankees. I know they're going to be active between now and July 30th at 6 p.m., and they need to be. But man, they've sprung a lot of leaks here over the last month or so. And I still believe that no matter what they do here, if some of the players on the team, not named Soto, Judge, and Cole, do not wake up, they can't make the playoffs no matter who else they get. I mean, they could get Vlad Guerrero and a really good reliever. At some point, you can't be a 3 or 4 man team. And right now, they're a 3-man team. Thoughts?
You don't even have them in the playoffs. I mean, I think they'll get in at some level, but I mean, 9-20 in the last month, second worst record to the White Sox. I mean, Judge and Soto can only do so much, and they are the two best hitters in the American League. But you can't have everybody else below a 700 OPS plus, below average, league average. It just doesn't work like that. Now they'll get Stanton back, and he'll be a help, but their offense is not good. I mean, eventually, some of these teams are going to wake up and stop pitching to at least Judge. I mean, Soto, I guess, is going to walk no matter what they do anyway. But Judge should be walked a lot more. I don't really understand why they pitched to him yesterday. Maybe Cash doesn't think the Rays are in it anyway. I don't know, but they got away with it, obviously. But a two-man offense is not going to win the World Series. I don't. I think we both can agree on that.
John, and I think a lot of this is, look, at this point, LeMahieu's in his mid-30s. Maybe he's done, and they're going to have to figure out something else there. But Carlos Rodon is in his prime. Gleyber Torres is in his prime. These players who are in their prime, and I understand, Gleyber is a guy who probably very badly wants to stay a Yankee for his career, knows that's almost certainly done in his walk year now and will end up someplace else, and it's probably affecting him. But I just keep watching the team, and it feels like, oh, Judge and Soto are batting. Oh, the Yankees scored or didn't score. I'll be back in an hour to see if they score again when those two guys get up. Their utter brilliance. The rest of the lineup, I mean, for want of a better term, John, kind of sucks.
Yeah, it's not basketball. You can't win with two great players. That's not
You
going to
did the
do it.
basketball analogy today.
For a second, half a second. I mean, 7 out of 9, 78% of the lineup is not good right now. Bad, really bad, and they're not going to win like that ultimately. I mean, I think they'll sneak into the playoffs even if they continue this, but certainly shown that they're at least very, very streaky. Gleyber, I think we all know what's going on. I mean, he wants to, even if he doesn't want to be a Yankee, it's the walk here, right? I mean, I kind of agree with you that he probably wants to be a Yankee, but let's take us New Yorkers out of it for the equation for a second. It's the fact that it's the walk here and he's not handling it. I mean, some guys love the walk here. Obviously, Judge did. Soto's doing very well with the walk here. Cole was amazing in the walk here, as we recall, but I mean, Gleyber's not on that level anyway, but he certainly shouldn't be on this level, whatever level that is.
You know what's amazing, John, is they are so deep into this season, like 100 games, and Boone is still trying to move the deck chairs around the Titanic. It's like Soto and Judge are 2 and 3. Suddenly, Ben Rice, who's played about 20 games, is the leadoff hitter. Austin Wells suddenly became the cleanup hitter. And by the way, I think of the guys on the team, those two guys are having the best at bats of people not named Judge and Soto. but those are pretty young players to do this. I do think it puts some pressure on Brian Cashman to find a bat. Is that Vlad Jr.? I'm not sure that Toronto feels like with a year left on of control that they're going to move him with
How
some.
does he even fit? I'm not even sure. I mean, obviously he's the best hitter out there. I certainly understand why you point. How would he fit? I mean, to me, Rice is livable, and then you've got Rizzo in reserve. So I would look at the other.
But
I
but
think
but
on many other
third
positions.
but third base is hard to find, and maybe even second base is hard to find right now. Vlad Guerrero is a tremendous hitter who's performing great. Rizzo's contract. First of all, Rizzo isn't even close to beginning a rehab,
Yeah, okay.
so
I'm
he's
giving Rizzo
smart.
a little. Yeah, I'm
Like
kind of with you on that one. But
like
Rice is doing okay, right? We can live with Rice at the moment, anyway.
yeah. And Rice is a kid, who knows? He's started to strike out a lot. It's been impressive what he's done, but I mean, if I could get Vlad Guerrero Jr., I would take a shot of. And by the way, like you mentioned, Stanton's coming back. Great, maybe he'll play. That just means we're on the clock for when he's injured again. I mean,
Well, I don't know. I
I'm
think he's. Let's look on the bright side. Let's say he's had his injury. I mean, I think there are other teams that are going to be more desperate for Vlad Guerrero, and beyond
like
that, Toronto. I don't think they have the guts to actually move him at this point, right? Do you think? Do you
yeah,
believe that? I don't think they can move him.
I don't think they have the guts to do it. I agree with you because there's
Right.
a lot of people whose butts are on the line there as far as their jobs, and they've got to at least fake it like they've got a shot in 2025. But that's what they'd be doing
That's.
because
I agree. I agree.
their
Because
core would be the fifth worst core in the AL East before they begin to make additions in the offseason. So I'm not sure how they
right,
think that they're going to get there. I think this is a moment hitting is so bad in the major leagues that I would
right.
capitalize on it and just say, the Guerrero Bichette period, which began in what,
Yeah.
2019, where they've made the playoffs 3 times and gone 0-6 in the postseason, that's over. Bichette's having a terrible year and is now on the injured list for a while.
Yeah.
Guerrero isn't going to sign long term there. Like capitalize on a market that's
Um,
dying for a bat.
I'm
And
with you. They should trade him, but if even if they muster the guts to trade him, they're not trading to the Yankees. I don't
right,
believe that.
like
I,
Seattle kind of team,
yeah,
like is
right. I mean,
desperate for.
that would take supreme guts to trade him
Yes.
from Toronto to the Yankees. And although he has come out recently, fairly recently, and said he'd play for the Yankees, right? And we know that he was upset his dad was all but signed and all that, but now he said he'd play. But it's not up to him. It's up to the powers that be with Toronto, and they're not trading to the Yankees. I mean, I'm thinking more like, third base, guys we've talked about before, in India, Renhefo, guys who can play third, guys who can play second. Certainly third would be helpful. I mean, if they get Matt Chapman, but then again, the Giants, they're kind of all in for the year too, right? Are they going to be sellers? I mean, some teams are starting to lean sell. I think Cincinnati's probably leaning sell. Detroit's probably leaning sell, though not Scooble. It's still a big seller's market, right? We know Arizona's going for it. I do think the Giants will probably go for it. I mean, can the Cubs sell? They're 3.5. I know they're last, but they're 3.5 out in Chicago. Remember the white
What does
flag trade?
Chicago have to sell though? That's part of the
Yeah, I
issue.
don't think it would be a great sale. I mean, people talk about Bellinger and people rip that contract, but meanwhile, he's overpaid, right? This contract that was so terrible, nobody's going to want to take $30 million. I don't believe. I'm sure Harper's stumping for him in Philly, but I don't think that goes very far. And Harper's done a great job stumping for people. He's helped bring in the right people, right? Trey Turner has been great. Schwarber's been great, but I mean, there's a limit at some point. That team is already the best team. They need just a little help on the margins, maybe an outfielder who plays part-time, maybe another bullpen piece. Although that team is so good right now, right? I mean, they
Yeah.
got a great top three. If you move Sanchez to the four, that's good, very good for a fourth pitcher. He was an all-star. You put him in the bullpen. They had two guys who've been like setup men who are all-stars, this year, right? I mean, that team is way ahead of any other team. In fact, somebody with the Dodgers at the All-Star game said to me, that's the first time in the last several years I looked across the field and said, you know what? That team's better than us. So
Yeah. I,
that's a
I
pretty good compliment for the Phillies.
let's jump to the Mets, who are obviously in the Phillies division. They're not catching them. I wonder if I could make a case that the Mets should be more than just marginal buyers. I don't expect them to go to the top of the market, but more than just, hey, we could add a Phil Maton type because of our money situation And it's because the team second in the division is Atlanta. We've kept thinking there are two playoff spots open in the National League, the sixth spot and the fifth spot. The Mets are 4 games behind Atlanta, who on the same day put Max Fried on the injured list and lost Ozzie Albies. They're already playing the whole season without the NL MVP and Acuna Jr. and without Spencer Strider, who probably would have been their ace or number 2 starter to Fried. The starters they're depending on, 40-year-old Charlie Morton, Chris Sale, who's threw 150 innings over the 4 previous years, Ronaldo Lopez, who was a reliever for the 4 previous years. I think they're vulnerable. I would bet on them to make the playoffs off of DNA and enough talent, but it opens another route for the Mets to get to the playoffs. And I think for a team that's only made it 10 times in their history, go for it a little.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think they should go for it. And they're smart people, right? They can figure out which of these prospects, maybe it's not easy, but figure out which of them isn't going to be a superstar and use them as a trade fodder. And, they have a very deep lineup right now, although I guess people could make a case they could use an outfielder, right? We'll see on Marte coming back. McNeil's looking better, but maybe they could use an outfielder. But really, if you just get some stars in that bullpen, and right now they're holding down the fort, right, with Budo, Nunez, and Diaz. They're living with it. They're surviving, but I mean, they need some extra help. And, to really be a threat, I do think they'll need reinforcements in that pen and some upgrades throughout. But they're not in a bad situation. They got a deeper lineup than most. They got more good starting pitchers than most. Maybe they do. I think what Mike Puma reported a couple months ago, which is consider trading one of the starters and moving things around a bit. I don't think they're going to trade Severino at this point. Not only is Severino doing a great job scouting the Yankees, saying that they only have 2 good hitters. I mean, he's been an ace. He's pitched like an ace. So I don't hold on to him, but certainly they got enough depth. And with Senga coming back, they could potentially trade Quintana or possibly even Minaya and get something good for it, because it is a seller's market, especially for starting pitchers.
Yeah, I expect the Mets to buy and sell and to try. Why not? This is not a great group of secondary. You mentioned it's the Phillies, then the Brewers and the Dodgers, and then like we would have expected the Braves to be part of it, but just who they're down, I think it opens up 3 playoff spots potentially, and the Mets should go for it. John, just as a way to close this before we invite Ron Darling in here.
Let me do one thing on the Braves. Yeah. We mentioned the Braves. How about them signing Whit Merrifield? I mean, is the guy going to hit 400 now? I already got Yankee fans complaining, why didn't we sign him? And I know he was discussed briefly by the Yankees, and they just didn't think he had much left, so they didn't go for it. And they're going to either, LeMahieu, Cabrera, Birdie. I mean, J.D. Davis, I don't know what he's doing there. Is he going to give him a shot? I don't know. You got 8 days to figure it out or get somebody. So I kind of get it. I mean, Merrifield was a really good player at one time. He didn't do much with the Phillies this year, but he's going to hit well with the Braves, right?
Yeah, the Yankees already have Merrifield. It's called DJ LeMahieu. Anyway, it's a once great player who isn't hitting. It's funny, John, that you got it. Is when I put on Twitter that the Dodgers had signed Nick Anderson to a contract because it's the Dodgers, like it's the Braves. Everyone said, "Oh, why didn't the Mets or Yankees go get him?" He's going to have a 1-something ERA for the Dodgers.
They're good. They're good.
Tell me, let's finish this. You do one, and then I'll do one, and we'll finish it. Is there a team you're most interested in as we're about 10 days or less than 10 days, about 8 days out from the trade deadline? The one that, yeah,
it's a team we've talked about long. The White Sox, they have the worst team by far. Now they've lost 7 in a row. As we do this, they're going to threaten the 62 Mets, but I'm not interested about that. I'm interested in what they're going to do with Crochet and Robert, because they have 2 and 3 years left, respectively, with those 2 players. And everybody's assuming at this point, with all the discussion, that they're going to get traded. And I'm kind of thinking Crochet's probably going to get traded. Robert more like 50-50, but obviously they have those 2, and then they have a bunch of other guys as well: Fetty, Pham, DeJong, Kopech. They got a lot of pieces to trade, but Robert and Crochet are probably the most. I mean, you could say Skubal's the most interesting, but is that 20-1 that he actually gets moved? I don't know, something like that.
I think it's a big, long shot. I'm with you. I think Crochet has a good shot at getting traded. I think Robert is a little more difficult. The team I'm watching just because of the depth of what they could trade if they decide to go that way, is the Rangers, the
Yeah.
defending champions. I talked to Chris Young at the All-Star game, which was in Arlington in his backyard. And look, he won't talk about it. He said it's not true, but other teams are saying, like the offseason, the ownership's putting a little bit of a financial crunch on them. They're at about 250 million projected. They could probably spend enough to kill 13 million and get under the tax if they want to. They got 7 free agent pitchers available and at all levels. They got 3 interesting relievers who've all closed in their careers: Leclerc, Yates, Robertson. They've got some starting pitching, including Nathan Eovaldi, that every team would want because A, he's good, and B, he has one of the best postseason resumes you could have. Plus Max Scherzer, plus Heaney, plus Lorenzen, who could start or relieve for you going down the stretch. John Gray with a year left. And then, because of the lack of bats out there, Adolis Garcia is not having a good season, but it's Adolis Garcia. He was the ALCS MVP last year. He still has 17 homers, and Nate Lowe, the first baseman. So I think, by the way, I don't think they want to rebuild. I think that they feel they could move all that, get stuff, and then still have Seager, Simeon, Josh Smith, Wyatt Langford, Carter, Young as a core group moving forward and still be good. So I think they lost 2 out of 3 over the weekend to Baltimore. They're just about to take on the White Sox as we're doing this show. So maybe they kick their butt, win 3 straight, and they are forced to keep going for it. But they're as interesting a swing team to me, John, as there is
Yeah.
out there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they got a lot of pieces that they could trade and get good stuff for. Obviously, it's a talented team. They won the World Series. But on the other hand, you've got coming back Josh Young, Carter, Molly, DeGrom, who I hear from you that looks pretty good. I mean, they are the defending champion. They're not in a division where anybody's kicking, you know what, at this point. Although give Houston credit for coming back on Seattle. I mean, Seattle's hitting. What are they hitting? 218 as a team. I mean, Seattle's got to do something. But from the buying perspective, they need to do something. But you're the Texas expert, I think, but I do think I would go for it if I'm them. But I think everybody should go. Not the White Sox shouldn't go for it, the Rockies, but I think the defending champion with that talent, with DeGrom coming back, I'm kind of leaning go for it if you're them.
Yeah, I think they should go for it. I think that they have a weak schedule the rest of the way. They're the defending champs, and I think, like you said, they've got injured key guys close to return. I think they're good. I wonder if they're feeling pressure from above. We'll focus even more on the Yankees and Mets, their season so far, trade deadline, and more. If you stick with us on the show with Joel Sherman and Jon Heyman, we have Ron Darling coming up next. John and I are so excited to have our colleague from MLB Network and the great announcer from SNY, Ron Darling, join us. And I say this sincerely, Ron. I love looking at the schedule and seeing when we're working together for the same reasons as I like tuning into SNY when you're on. I know I'm always going to be forced to think and learn something. So we appreciate so much you joining us on the show. John and I talked in the opening segment of this about what the Mets should do. And I think we were both in favor of them, maybe not an all-out buy, because that wasn't their plan this year, but to be somewhat aggressive because they're in it. And by the way, not that long ago, we thought the Braves were clearly going to be the lead wild card team. It might be possible, especially with the recent injuries to Fried and Albies joining Acuna and Strider, that all 3 wild card spots are open. And so we think the Mets should go for it. What does Ron Darling think?
It's pretty funny. I think all 3 of us have been watching baseball these last few seasons with the 12 teams that now make it into the postseason. And if you're a 500 team on August 15th, you have 40 games left. You'll be in some kind of race with 40 games left to play. And you either have to go 25-15 or 30-10, depending on your competition. So I think that baseball is so fleeting that when you have a shot, I think you should take a shot. Now, I think that the Mets organization is a little more conservative now. I think they're going to be a little more patient. I think they're going to be quieter than louder. But we all know from the Washington Nationals in 2019 to, of course, the Braves in 2021, that if you add 3 or 4 small pieces, you can really make a big difference. And I think for the Mets particularly, if you look at their ball club, you can see where two or three kind of new players in the mix might really help their ball club.
Where and Ron, thank you again for joining us. I think you might be our most frequent guest, so we really appreciate you coming on
Nice.
again. Where would you add? I mean, everyone's kind of focused in one spot, but is there anywhere else where you would add right now?
Yeah, I think that I would think about the last season and plus. I think Brooks Raley has filled a big role as the left-hander out of that bullpen. I don't think they've found that guy to replace him yet. That could be a thought. Bullpen arms, of course, always are key, so they can add anything there. Um, the Marte situation, I think, is the most troubling. I mean, at some point, and we've seen this happen in New York before, is that you're waiting on a player to come back and you're counting on him to come back, and he never comes back. So, in the meantime, while he's trying to get his stuff right, they could certainly use a little more production in right field, at least from the left-hand side. I know they've tried to cover that with Iglesias playing second and McNeil in right field, because DJ Stewart is going through a tough time right now. But those kind of corner bats, and I think also some veteran bats to use off the bench in case you have a tight game late. I think those are the kind of things I would add. Now, as far as starting pitching is concerned, the Mets have gone in the way of having a lot of arms. They have more depth probably than a lot of teams when you look around the league. But they don't have that one kind of ace kind of guy. You're not going to get him on the open market, I don't think. But anytime you can add a big starter, that would be key. But I think they've gotten, I mean, from Severino and Minaya, I don't know how you could ask for anything more, considering how low they were considered by most teams in the game.
You mentioned the offense, and it feels like some of this gets answered if Pete Alonso has a good last 2 months of the season. Maybe the free agency is wearing on him. What is Ron Darling seeing daily with Pete Alonso?
Well, first, the lineup, let's say. The Mets have the kind of offensive lineup where depth is their strength. So if they're not hitting on all cylinders with 7 out of their 9 hitters kind of doing their thing, then they're not going to really score the way they can. But that time when Lindor and Nimmo and Martinez and others were all hitting in that one period, that was their best offensive output so far this year. What's going on with Pete Alonso? We've seen it before. It's very difficult to go through a free agent year in New York. And listen, the last time we saw Judge do it, no one did it better. But it's a very difficult thing to be a home run hitter, and play in a team concept, and know that you're only considered worthy if you hit 45 or more home runs and drive in 125 or more home runs. I think that's a lot of pressure. But if you're going to sign someone to a big contract, you hope that they can handle that kind of pressure. I think he's made some adjustments, Joel and John. Some of them have been good. Some of them have have been more challenging. If you look at all the ancillary numbers, and whenever we do BK show, Brian Kenny show, we certainly look at all those numbers. The hard hit rate is there. So Lindor and Nimmo in April had some of the hardest hit rate in the game and had awful Aprils and then turned it around. You're hoping that happens for Alonso as well.
I'm going to follow up on this. And you mentioned, of course, Judge having that great free agent year. Soto's obviously doing it. Maybe not quite to that degree of a record-breaking year, but he's having a very good free agent year. But I want to follow up on Alonso. And I put Michael Kay on the spot a few weeks back when he was on. So you went to Yale. He didn't. I'm going to put you on the spot as well.
Okay.
What should they do with Alonso? Should they bring him back? Should they pay him whatever he wants? Or I mean, this is a big question that the Met fan is interested in, even if he's not having a great year right now.
In 1978 through 81, I missed that class on what free agents should look for or whatever. But, no, I think
I just meant you can handle the question. That's all.
I think. Listen, I think the world of Pete. So, the hardest part about our job sometimes is when you think the world of a guy, and try to equate that to what you think his worth is. And he's played himself. See, the game has changed so much. 5 or 6 years ago, anyone that was hitting a lot of home runs would be considered a guy that would get a huge contract. We see guys like Freddie Freeman and the way he produces. That's going to be a comp for Pete. Can he live up to what Freeman does each and every year? Different kind of player, right? So, I think Pete is a valuable part of this organization. I think he, on and off the field, has represented the organization in an amazing way. I think that's really important as well. I just think that the game considers home run hitters that are first basemen for some reason right now not as valuable as they did 5 or 6 or 7 seasons ago when Goldschmidt and others got their contracts. So I think he's going to have to keep that in perspective as he goes. Plus side for Pete, not many guys 40 home runs every single year just waking up. That's kind of what he's shown he can do. He's a great teammate. He's a good guy for your organization. Although those things are going to be really attractive. And with the dearth of offense, when you look at some of these teams in the league, there's a lot of fits for him. So should the Mets bring him back? Absolutely. Will they? It'll be hard.
Ron, you mentioned that the Mets aren't likely to get an ace out in the marketplace, but Kodai Senga is close to returning, and he pitched like an ace, especially in the second half of last season. But he had a shoulder injury. We're talking to an ex-pitcher here who loves the art and knows it like few others. What do you think they have in Senga the rest of the season?
Yeah, it's a huge unknown, Joel. I was very lucky in that I never got injured during the season. I had 4 or 5 surgeries in the off season, but I never got injured in a season where I had to enter in July or August and try to see what kind of pitcher I was going to be. How healthy was I going to be from start to start? That's kind of what it's going to be for Senga. I think we've seen through his rehabilitation process that he's played probably the biggest role. A lot of times when you have a guy on your payroll, you kind of dictate, how he comes back to your team. But I think Senga has really dictated when and if he's going to come back. And it was really predicated on how he felt, I think, medically, how his shoulder felt. He didn't want to take a chance on injuring himself. So that'll be the big key, is that under stress, pitching in big league games with big league pressure, when you have to throw that forkball 92 miles an hour, will that shoulder live up to the stress? He doesn't know the answer. I certainly don't know the answer. But when he's at his best, he does something that's unique. He throws a pitch that no one else in the game has. That's very few and far between for pitchers in the game.
Since you are a pitching expert, I do want to ask you why so many pitching injuries. Do you have a theory on that? And why the guys who are healthy, many of them are dominating. The league's still hitting around 242. Any theories on any of this?
Well, I think there's, you guys know, there's 1,000 reasons, and we certainly couldn't tackle them all on this show. Here's a couple of them. One is that it's become a 12-month sport. I'm just going to use myself for an example, and I usually don't do this. I never spent one day on the injured list, injured list, different list in my day, but didn't spend one day. And my routine would always be is that I'd pitch during the season. I'd take November and December off. January, I'd play catch. February, I'd throw off the mound. March, I'm ready for games. I did that my entire career, never spent one day on the injured list. But the most important part of all this, so I don't think 12 months a year is good. I think guys that are going at it in December, wherever they're doing it, and going at it, it's just not good. The body needs to recoup. And I think my phrase that I use, John and Joel, is that the game has changed in this way. And I'm not saying it's good or it's bad, or it's just that the game has changed. My generation of pitcher chased outs. How many outs can you get? Today's pitcher chases velocity. It's really a distinct difference in a philosophy on how to pitch a game. When I watch pitchers today, it's one of the most amazing things to me to watch a guy like Spencer Strider a year ago throw and ask him how many pitches does he throw 100%. He says, I throw 100% on every pitch. I find that so amazing because I did it for a living, and I know that I couldn't have done that because my thought was never like that. Out of 120 to 125 pitches that I would throw in a game, 10 might be as hard as I can throw. 15 maybe in a crazy kind of game. And when would I throw hard? I don't know. Mike Schmidt, a guy on third and less than 2 outs, a 3-2 count, and you throw it a little harder than you have all game. You try to save that up. That's a different way of pitching. I'm not saying it's a better way of pitching, but it's a different way of pitching. Chasing outs versus chasing velocity.
Ron, if I could stick on it, is the genie out of the bottle, you think, or could an organization say, why don't we, especially an organization that maybe isn't a successful organization, say, why don't we try to zig while everyone's zagging and see if we could teach our starting pitchers about durability, like managing a game? Or are there 9 monsters who could hit a homer in a lineup and you can't let up? If you do, if you throw less than 100%, you're going to have a terrible ERA, etc. Genie out of the bottle or not?
I think the genie might be out of the bottle, Joel. I think we're at a point where the player, when he comes to a team, is compromised and challenged already. That being said, you look at a guy like Paul Skeens. When he left LSU, and he's since Strasburg, for me, he's the finest pitching prospect I've seen. When he was at LSU in the College World Series, he was routinely throwing 120 to 125 pitches, and now he's down 100 pitches on the pro level. Could Pittsburgh have said with Jarrett Jones, with Paul Skeens, said to themselves, okay, we're a small market. We're a kind of team that has to win on the margins. We have drafted a generation of pitchers that no one else has. How do you keep the best talent that we have, which is pitching, on the field? Best way to do that would be to pitch them 120, 125. That all of a sudden takes you in the seventh, eighth, possibly pulling a Lugo going into the ninth inning. But I think the genie's out of the bottle when I heard this phrase or this remark from someone in baseball. There are some teams now, Joel and John, that are looking for college pitchers that are having Tommy John surgery and drafting them low because they've already had the surgery. They can rehab them in a place where they don't have to worry about that anymore, and they might be able to really have a high yield. That's a statement that I had never heard before.
Lugo, I like that. I know of Maddox, Seth Lugo. It's really amazing. He's a Cy Young
Right.
contender through the complete game when no one throws a complete game. So hats off to him. Fantastic. I saw him at the All-Star game. I never would have believed it, but one of the best pitchers in baseball. Good for him. Speaking more about pitching, Severino and Minaya, you alluded to them earlier. They weren't that coveted. What do you see from them? Severino is a very honest guy, as we know, as he truthfully told us that the Yankees have only 2 good hitters. He also mentioned that he was the worst pitcher in baseball last year, so we love this guy in the media. What is he doing right? And Minaya, too. I mean, I think they both outperformed. So, I mean, give Jeremy Hefner credit as well, but both these guys have done very, very well.
Yeah, that's nice of you, John. I think it's important to really point out Jeremy Hefner, who's been with the Mets longer than anyone else. He's been there a long time, and he does a great job. But I think you have to give the athletes most of the plaudits, because I think, Minaya went from being a starter, throwing a no-hitter, to being a bulk inning guy with San Francisco, didn't put his head down, went and worked out this winter and tried to figure out what could make him better. He's certainly at a place right now where you count on him to be a big person in your starting rotation, and he's done a fine job. Severino is a step up. He really has delivered. When we saw him in 17, 18, 19, all of us, I mean, he looked like trying to think, Jose Rijo. Do you guys remember him?
Yes.
Riho from like 1990 with the great slider. That's what he reminded me of, that he was going to be that kind of pitcher. And of course, the injuries took their toll. But I really applaud him as well, because he's come back from a season that was so forgettable that you might have lost all your confidence as a professional athlete and turned it around. And each time he takes the ball, the Mets feel like they're going to win. And that's the best compliment you could pay any starting pitcher.
You know, John, you mentioned Seth Lugo. John mentioned Seth Lugo. Why don't I stick with Seth Lugo?
Okay.
I think he felt a little insulted. I got to say that. I asked him a question at the All-Star game. I said, if you and I were standing in the clubhouse in 2017, and I said, by the way, the only guy in this clubhouse among the pitchers who's going to be an All-Star at the 2024 All-Star game, it's not going to be Harvey or Syndergaard or Matz or
Yeah,
DeGrom
yeah.
or even Will. It's going to be you. What would you say? And he said, he's a self-confident guy. He said, I would have believed it. And do you believe it? You saw him when he wanted to be a starter, and he clearly was a high-end, especially multi-inning use reliever.
Yeah.
What do you think of this transfer? He might be the AL Cy Young winner.
Well, when you think about it, if you want to judge him on merit and what he did, his job with the Mets was an inning, 2 innings of relief, multi-inning reliever, like you said. If you look at his numbers, every time he came in, just about every time, he was unbelievable. The Mets felt, and I think part of it was some of their medicals on him, that he couldn't withstand a full season of 30 starts, and that it was more important to protect him and to keep him in the bullpen than to have him as a starter. Now, again, he is in the bullpen, and Harvey and DeGrom and others are pitching on the mound. So, um, listen, Seth Lugo always had the talent. He just needed a shot. He's not the first guy to be put in that position. There's been many people that have had to stand behind others before they got their shot, and I'm just really happy for him. I'm happy that he's an all-star. I'm happy he's with Kansas City. More importantly, I'm happy that he's getting the chance to start. And I don't think to show everyone up. I think to show himself that I believed I could do it, and now he's doing it.
Joe, I think you're right. I think he was a little insulted. In fact, I think he was more than a little insulted. I think he was quite insulted. But moving on to another topic, I'm going to go off the board here and ask. I mean, Ron is, I don't know if this is off the board, but off the topic, part of one of the best booths in baseball for sure. I want to ask you about the whole best booth controversy that became something in New York between our two most frequent guests, you and Michael Kay. But I will
Yeah.
ask you, what makes your booth is outstanding, whether it's the best or I don't know, but it is outstanding. What makes you guys so good?
Well, I mean, that's a hard question to answer. I sometimes I don't even believe all the hype. I do know this. We have a play-by-play guy that is kind of a caretaker of Mets history. He's as prepared as anyone who's ever done that job. We have Keith Hernandez, one of the greatest players to ever play this game, with his insight, but he's also got something that very few people have. He has comedic timing. I mean, that's really hard to do, and he's got it in spades. And everything that seems to come out of his mouth is at least funny to me. So it's got to be funny to others. And I don't know what
It's
my
funny.
role is,
It's
and I won't even
funny.
go, I won't even go into that. But I think that what happened for us is that we all three came together 19 years ago. Gary was coming from radio; he had something to prove. I had done very little TV, I had something to prove, and Keith had worked as an analyst, kind of part time, when he felt like it, and he was going to take on a full role, so he had something to prove as well. And sometimes when you put certain personalities with their back against the wall with something to prove, they get it done. So um, I don't know, best boot stuff or whatever. I honestly 100% felt Michael's pain. Why he would on his show have to read something that hadn't gone by someone who produces his show that said, it might be a bad idea for Michael to read that the rival booth is the best booth in the game. All he had to say, I mean, just change it to catch Gary, Keith, and Ron and SNY. It doesn't have to be the best booth in the game. So I 100% felt Michael's pain and didn't think it was fair either. I mean, how that got through all his producers, I don't know how.
Well, we know the real Subway Series is you guys versus those guys starting tomorrow. So Ron, as a way to wrap up, I wonder if I can follow and ask you. You didn't say what your part is, but so let me see if I can ask the question in this specific way. When you begin a game, do you want to accomplish something? Like, do you feel like my job is to make
Hmm.
sure a fan knows something he didn't know before?
Hmm.
I could take them in. Do you have a goal as a broadcaster day to day in what you feel is a mandate for you?
Boy, that's the best question I've ever gotten about the subject. Do I have a preconceived kind of feel for what I want to talk about? No, not at all. And in fact, I think that's one of at least my strengths is that I prepare. Um, I read Jon Heyman and Joel Sherman, and I make sure that I know what's going on around baseball. And I have 15 to 20 things that I would find interesting to talk about. Just like you guys probably think of 10, 15 things that you might want to write about. And over the course of a month, they come to fruition at some point. So in the game dictates what you talk about. So I might have 15 or 20 things that I find interesting that we might want to go into, but the game might be so tight. Or the pitching matchup we had talked about, it's 9-8 in the fourth inning. Things can change, and then you just kind of let the game dictate where it brings you. Kind of like surfing. You don't know what kind of wave you're going to be given, and you kind of try to stay on that board. But I'm lucky in the fact that Gary Cohen loves the game. He knows the entire sport and both leagues, which really helps. A lot of play-by-play guys, they know their team. They know the standings in the NL East, but they don't know anything about the AL West. That's not Gary. He knows all of that. And for Keith, I think, his important role for all of us is that Gary and I are probably more alike than Keith and I, and we're kind of nerdy in many aspects. And he keeps that booth loose, and so it doesn't get too nerdy and too dull. But Joel, you ask a great question. I think you're prepared to talk about anything, and the game kind of takes you. If you listen and watch it, it will always reward you with a space to talk about something interesting.
Yeah, well, if nothing else, Ron, just because I love to piss off Andrew Marchand, my friend, I'm glad you said that I asked you the best question about broadcasting that you've gotten.
There
So
you go.
I'm so glad for that. You take it, Andrew Marchand. But Ron, John mentioned how frequent a guest you've been. We truly appreciate it. We truly appreciate working with you at the network and listening to you on SNY. And we can't thank you enough again for joining us on the show with Joel Sherman and Jon Heyman.
I mean, you guys started this as a little ditty a little while ago, a little podcast thing and it's a must watch, must listen to, because you guys are talking baseball, and I know there's a lot of extra stuff, and there's so many personal stories in the game. You guys capture it on print, and I brought it to podcast. And listen, anytime you need me or want me, I'm here.
Thanks so much, Ron.
You're the
All the
best.
best.
Thanks. Thank you, Ron.
All right, guys.
We, of course, thank Ron Darling, such a great guest. John, we're going to do away with hit or error this week because Omar Minaya lost his wife, Rachel. We found out yesterday she passed away on Saturday at their home in New Jersey. A terrible tragedy. I texted Omar last night to send my condolences. I think there's probably few people in the sport in general, but certainly in New York, where he was the general manager of the Mets, and he works as a key advisor to Brian Cashman. Everybody likes Omar, and everybody is now feeling his pain and suffering with him and wishing his family the best. And we just, both of us know him well, and we just both wanted to say a little something and do away with hit or error for this week.
Yes, definitely. Omar is universally beloved. I was fortunate enough to go to dinner with Omar and Rachel a couple of times a few years back. And she was just a terrific, classy lady. Just very, very unfortunate, bad luck. Young woman in her mid 50s, Just very, very sad, tragic story. They have two great kids in their 20s, Teddy and Justin. Justin, NBA player, Teddy also doing very well in business. So that's good news. But this is just one of the saddest stories that I ever heard in baseball, and we all feel terrible about it.
Yeah, when I heard it last night, that first instinct, because I was asked to see if we had gotten a police tip, and I was asked to see if I could confirm it, and that's the one you're praying is wrong. And unfortunately, it wasn't wrong. So, heartfelt condolences to Omar and his family and his friends in the memory of his terrific wife, Rachel. As always, our producers, Jake Brown and Tommy Hogan, we thank them. Apple, Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts, please follow us, rate, review. The New York Post sports YouTube page, give us a view. Once again, peace to Omar and his family. And please stick with us on the show with Joel, Sherman, and Jon Heyman.